Hi, it's Steve Palladino from Palladino Power Project, and I'm bringing you part four of this video series where I'm discussing training load metrics. And in this particular episode, I'll be using the WKO Performance Manager chart, as well as some other charts that I have built for WKO4. Um, and the the topic of this particular part is that be aware that chronic training load is composed of these daily units of TSS, training stress score, and the similar model utilized in Power Center uses the daily units of RSS. How many RSS, what your score was for a given run or runs on a particular day. So the chronic training load, what we want to build, and when we're doing a build, is composed of these units of TSS or RSS. And it is true that TSS and RSS both reflect a metric that combines both volume or duration, more specifically, and relative intensity, whether it's percent FTP or percent CP. It is combining those two elements into a training load metric, TSS or RSS. The thing is that not all TSS or RSS is created equal. You can get 100 TSS running at 80% of your threshold, an easy aerobic run, and you could get 100 TSS doing interval work, so a high intensity interval training, and you can do two runs that, of course, are going to be different durations, but you could end up with two that say 100, and they both are 100. When you throw it into this model, it's 100. The model doesn't know the composition. It just knows what the total score is. So that is a crux here, is that you can look at training load, and that's telling you what your overall training load is when you're looking at both duration and relative intensity. It tells you what that is, but it doesn't necessarily tell you your intensity, what is the composition of that training load. So there's a number of different ways to ascertain that. Is that training load, is this ramp happening simply because the person's doing a lot of easy aerobic runs of long duration, or is it high intensity interval training, or is it a mix? How do we know? Well, one method is this dotted blue line here is called chronic intensity load. And basically this is just looking at intensity factor, which is normalized power divided by FTP, and doing some mathematics with that to get a chronic intensity load. But this is what the overall intensity is of the run, or a ride, or what have you. But it gives you what the overall intensity is. So yes, this is important, and I do like to see this rising as the chronic training load is rising, and I do like to see it drop a bit. But I found that chronic intensity load is not as perfect as I would have hoped. So what I did is I developed this chart in which I looked at two different components. And one is a component of greater than or equal to 95% of FTP or CP. The volume of running. So it's like time in zone at greater than 95% of threshold power. That's significant. That's 95% for most people is close to half marathon power. For most trained runners or well-trained runners, that's roughly about 80 to 81% of VO2 max. So you're getting there at that intensity level. So this represents everything at and above that level. So half marathon power tempo, threshold work, super threshold work, maximum aerobic power, even anaerobic work, all folds into this catch right here of greater than or equal to 95%. So you might consider this the overall higher intensity training. Then the other component is greater than or equal to 103% of FTP. So for most people, most runners, this is 90% of VO2 max or higher, and it also represents about 5K race effort for most people, and for more elite runners, it represents faster than 10K effort or harder than 10K effort. So this is sort of significantly into higher intensity training. So those particular volumes at that particular intensity, daily volume, gets folded into the model, the exponentially weighted rolling average with for chronic intensity load here, a 6-week time constant, or acute intensity load, a 7-day time constant, 1 week time constant. So if you look at this, it really gives me a good idea of what the overall load is in terms of this intensity. You can see that during this build, this chronic training load build, I'm also at the same time building intensity load as well at equal to or greater to 95% of FTP. We get a little bit of a move, but this is a chart for training for a marathon. You see someone's training for a 5K or 10K, you're going to see more movement of the chronic training intensity load that's greater than or equal to 103% of FTP. So you get a little bit more movement of this when you're training for a 5K or 10K, at least effectively. And I've even seen instances where we're building both, and we want to start changing the focus just a little bit to sharpening, going into the end of a middle distance to just 5K race season. We're building both, but then this will flatten out and even start to decline while we're still building the higher intensity. So this particular chart's pretty good at discerning how that chronic training load is composed. And so that's one. Of course, there's other ways of discerning how your TSS, how your chronic training load is composed. So you can look at your weekly summary. If you look at breaking things down into zones, here it is in the Palladino Power Project zones, how it's broken down. We can look at the percentage greater than 95%, greater than 100%. We can look at that, or we can look at it in graphical form, like we see here, where, for example, on this particular um, week here, the person had 8% in zone 3B, 3% in zone 4, 1% in zone 5. And we could also look at it in time if we want to look at how much time is spent in each zone. So, in other words, as we're looking at our chronic training load, there's a lot of things we want to do as we're interpreting. Yeah, we want to build it. We want to build it at the right ramp rate. But we also want to know how are we building that in terms of composition. And you can look at it weekly in terms of breakdown, in terms of time and zones, or graphically in terms of time and zones. You can look at a metric like chronic intensity load, but I particularly like this one here, which is the what I call intensity load at greater than or equal to 95%, and then also intensity load at greater than or equal to 103% of FTP or CP. So there you have it. You want to follow your chronic training load. You want to make sure you're doing that right, but you also, in doing it right, is not just managing the ramp rate, but also the composition. So hopefully that this helps, and we'll come back and put it all together with a couple of examples in the next episode. Thank you for watching. See you next time.